He's been asked that about 4 times.
I wasn't paying attention, sorry.
Hey,
Hey,
leave her alone. She's our guest.
good evening. Welcome to the City of River Falls Municipal Utility Advisory Board meeting for Monday, April 15th. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mashesky.
Here.
Odine.
Here.
Swanson. Here. Richter.
Here.
Spafford. Here. Toom.
Here.
Wells Mangold.
Here.
I want to introduce Amy White, our city clerk. She's filling in tonight for Lene Nelson, who's down at WPPI Energy getting some training on our North Star
Great.
software. So,
Welcome.
Amy, thanks for helping out. No problem. Good to have you here. Amy White, we accidentally call her Amy Clerk once in a while. It's by accident, but it's Amy White, the clerk.
Great. Thank you. Looking for approval of the minutes from the March 18th meeting.
I move approval of the minutes.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same. Minutes are approved. Now is the time for public comments. If anybody in the audience would like to come up and speak, be a good time to do so. The only time to do so. Nobody? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which is the acknowledgement of the West Central Wisconsin Biosolids Facility Commission meetings from the end of February and the Powerful Choices Committee meeting minutes from the middle of March.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same. Consent agenda is approved. And the first item under new business is the resolution recommending sanitary sewer lining.
We are privileged to have Tamara Jaworski here again this year for her annual sewer lining visit and sewer update. Tamara, we're
Hi.
excited to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. As Kevin said, I'm Tamara Jaworski. I'm the engineer tech with the city. Most of the engineer tech work that I do is involved with the utilities, water, sanitary, and electric. And I will apologize right off the bat because I know several of you have heard the first part of this before. Sewer lining hasn't changed much in the past several years, so for several of you, that's going to be a repeat. And we're going to start out with a video that, again, several of you have seen before. And when they line sewers, they go in one manhole, push a soft liner through to the second manhole. The ends are tied. That is then pressurized with steam, and that steam not only pressurizes it so that it pushes it against the host clay pipe, but also the steam then cures it. Reacts with the chemicals and hardens it into a solid substance, which I have a sample here, and I will leave with, I'll pass it around. It starts as a soft felt material, and after it's cured, it's hard like this. And hopefully this link will not take too long to come up.
In Situform's flagship cured-in-place pipe technology, or CIPP, is a pipe within a pipe, installed without digging. Resin-saturated, coated felt tubing is inverted or pulled into the existing pipe. Hot water or steam is then circulated throughout the tubing, curing the resin and forming a tight-fitting, jointless, corrosion-resistant pipe within a pipe. Service laterals are then restored using a robotically controlled cutting device. Finally, the rehabilitated pipe is fully inspected by closed-circuit TV. In Situform's trenchless technology is the world's most trusted pipe rehabilitation solution.
Okay, this is a slide that essentially shows what the video did, is that the pipe that is just within right here is the hard material that I passed around, and this is your damaged clay pipe. This slide simply shows that on the left, right here, you can see cracking. It's a sample of a pipe before it was lined. You can also see, if I can work the little deal here, you can see that at the sections where the clay is put together, sometimes those are offset. And then this right side shows the pipe after it's lined. Any offsets are, if they're extreme, those might have to be dug up, but in this scenario, it is not, and you get a nice smooth pipe. This map is a little bit hard to see. I wish it was clear, or it's not as clear as it could be. What I'm trying to show here is that we televise many parts of the city and rank the pipes from 1 to 5. And a 5 is what we rate as worst, imminent of collapse, needs repair right away. Now there is a section here that is red, bad, should be lined, except we're not going to do that. That's part of the North Interceptor project that Reed's been working on. The other reds in here are what you're going to see on the next slides. Some of those maps are in your packets, so they'll be a little easier to see than up here on the screen. But for the most part, we looked at 4s and 5s in terms of trying to decide what we were going to line. This is the cover area of the areas we're going to line. It shows an area up near Hoffman Park, a few in the middle of the city, a few down in the College View area. The importance of this, and this is in your packet, is this is an area that's particularly unique because this is in Hoffman Park. It is not a clay pipe. It's PVC. We're trying to be proactive on this particular pipe because within a year or so, this is going to be an exit ramp off the highway. So right now, this main and these manholes are about 12 feet deep. But starting next year sometime, they're going to be 40-some feet deep. When they make a decision on the thickness of a liner, it's based on several things, and one of those is how much soil is on top of that pipe. So I tried to make it clear to anybody who called, and also on this first map that they got, which was in the contract documents, that they need to make their calculations based on what the future depth will be. So this year they'll be putting it through a 12-foot manhole, but it's going to eventually be a 40-some foot deep main. So we are just being proactive on this rather than having the exit ramp go in and now there's 40 feet of soil on top of this and have a collapse and people backing up. So this particular one was not rated a 5. It's a preventative thing due to future development of the exit ramp. This just shows some piping that we're doing on East Pine Street. Are you hearing that? Am I talking too close to the mic? Are you getting a pop?
Yep.
Little bit? Is that better? Can you still hear?
You're just enunciating very well.
Okay. I don't want that to come over and be too irritating. This here also shows some 3 different pipes on Lake Street. This is a small section on South Wasson Lane. This is kind of a mix of a piece on River Hills and a section on Church Street. This is Washington Street and Hamilton. These particular ones had some particular issues that really needed lining. This is College View. And then now we're at a slide just kind of showing some of the statistics for the project for this year. 3,200 and some feet of 8-inch pipe is going to be lined. You see the 328 feet, that's the piece in the park, and that's why it says thicker liner. The reason I've put the 10-inch pipe that's 300 feet in red is because, as I explained last year, a few years ago, we put everything out as 8-inch pipe. That's what we thought it was. The lining crew came in and realized, you've got a 10-inch pipe. Well, then we didn't have a bid item. Now you're haggling with the lining company for the right price. Don't want to short them, don't want to short us. So that item is in there solely because if they find something that we think is 8, but they've actually found it to be 10, we've got a bid item. And then you see the total amount of footage, and then the services that's the home laterals that'll be cut out. We, this year, got 6 bids. My estimate when I did this work prior to putting the contract out was around $103,000. Visi Sewer, this is the second or third year in a row, I think it's the third year in a row, that they've got the lowest bid, and they came in at $100,968. They were the lowest bidder. We've used them before and been quite happy with them. We've budgeted or have budgeted $175,000, so this $100,000 is below our budgeted amount for the year. I just thought I would include a few statistics for the city. I know that your packet also, I gave you a 2007 that I don't have up here. I wanted you to look back. I can only give you as far back as 2007 in that packet because I came in 2007, and our mapping system, if you don't archive the data, you're losing anything from past history. So pretty much what I'm trying to show here is that the clay pipe, if you see clay pipe in 2018 is around 118,000, and that dropped to 113. Most of that is as the result of our lining. As you see, the length of clay pipe is highlighted in, the length of line pipe is highlighted in red, and that's gone up. That's from the prior year's lining. If you look at the length of PVC pipe, that has gone up also. That's new development in Sterling Ponds from last year. And then that, of course, also explains the total length change on the bottom of 330,000 because we've had new development. I don't think Sterling Ponds first edition, I don't remember if I did these statistics after or before that development. I think that is already represented in here. If not, next year when I'm before you, you'll see a change there. The very bottom, as I say, so far the percent of pipe lined is around 20%. And that was taking just the downtown portions, the older pipe, not looking at PVC, HDPE. We don't want to line those if they should be in good shape. Any questions?
That 20% is 20% of, is that 20% of all the pipe
No,
or of the 4s and 5s?
that is 20% of all the pipe, but 20% of pipe that is clay, pipe that is cast iron. So I took the old pipe that we might want to line throughout the entire city, not just the 4s and 5s, but took the whole city, then took out of there the PVC pipe and the ductile iron, because those are not ones that we would typically, and the HDPE, because we wouldn't want to line those.
Yeah.
So it is the entire, but not including the good, newer quality pipe.
Okay.
So that number actually really represents a good percentage of downtown area, because that's the older part of town that has clay.
Tack onto that a little bit.
Sure.
So really, you need to help me with my statistics here, but I would guess we're 85 to 90% of the 4s and 5s are lined after this year.
Yes, of what we know. Now, we'll continue to televise,
Yes.
and as we find more stuff, there could be 5s out there that we have not televised yet.
But we're fairly, and I just want to just make the point, you think back to 5 years ago when we were not spending much on lining and we did recognize we had some problem areas. We've really, in the last 5 years, ramped up our attention to the 5s and 4s.
Yes.
With continued emphasis on televising, locating, and repairing.
That is correct.
And then I also just want to make, Tamara mentioned that we had $175,000 in the budget for this, and this contract is for $100,000. We do leave ourselves some room, so throughout the year, if we do identify bad areas, we have money available to fix those as well.
And that did happen last year. The bid went out, the company got the bid, and Ron, the water superintendent, we found another pipe before they started their lining. So when we had the pre-construction meeting, we sat down and said, okay, we've got 300 more feet of pipe that if you're able, could you add it on? And they were able to. So if between now and when contracts are signed and we get in and they're ready to get going, if we find something else through Ron's televising, or heaven forbid somebody calls and there's a problem and a collapse and whatever, that may be added to the project.
That is a nice feature we have too. As of a few years ago, we did purchase that vac truck, which does have televising and cleaning equipment. So we are able to go clean and televise our system now on a regular rotating basis, which is also something we did not have a few years ago.
That's correct. And on one of the very earlier slides when I showed you the map with the 4s and 5s and 3s, a little hard to see up there, if you took off the mains that I've just showed you that we're going to do this year, the only 5s left on there there's a little piece by the university because nothing's going into it. It's not technically abandoned, but there's nothing being fed in it. So even though it's not in great shape, no point in repairing that. And then the section of the Lamenti, which again is part of a longer-term project and the reroute and whatnot. So
Interchanges with North.
yeah,
Interceptor.
North Interceptor. Sorry, common.
Same thing,
yeah.
different. work.
North Interceptor Sewer Project and Lamenti, yeah, same. Anything?
Tomorrow,
Yes.
well, I'd just like to say I think this is a great program, and I think what I've seen with your vac truck and your capabilities of televising is very good investment. One question, has the price for the lining, has that stayed fairly stable? It seemed like you were able to predict the cost fairly closely.
I'd like to say yes, however, I was taught a few years ago by, many of you may not remember Dave Keating, but did a lot of project management work, and he told me when you do these estimates, to add 10% each year.
Yeah.
So-
So you see it going up.
So
then,
there is a price increase, but
Right,
I've not
right.
seen a dramatic, and I've been lucky in that my 103 came up pretty close to the low 100. So there is a increase, but then I guess there's cost of living increase for everybody and everyone. So
Right, and there appears to be good competition, and that's all you can
Yes.
ask. I guess I have one other comment, though. This section at Glen Park that we're going to add, that we're going to increase the depth on that.
On Hoffman, you mean?
Or Hoffman,
Yep,
yes,
okay.
excuse me. Now, I'm just curious if there's been any other engineering work done on that to determine what additional strength you need there. It just appears leaving something like that to a contractor to figure out. I mean, just for the fact that once you bury it 40 feet deep, now it's going to be difficult to dig,
dig
expensive
up.
to dig that up. So to me, that's one of the areas that maybe, I'm not certainly wouldn't be opposed to lining it, but how predictable is the liner's strength adding to an existing pipes there that you don't really know everything that's about?
Right. I don't know how well I can answer that. This I will say, I know Ron, our sewer superintendent, has had some conversations about it, and he's also discussed with some, I'm assuming experts, also on the manhole itself,
Yeah.
wondering how many stacks of section this can hold also.
Right.
I know that when they do any of this lining, they look at load, so if it's under road versus not. Depth, and there are formulas that they did give to us, I and Ron and Greg. I can't claim to know and understand all of the formulas.
Oh, and you shouldn't. I'm just
And-
curious,
and-
has Reed looked at it?
And just building that a little bit. So I know Ron, Reed, and some engineering consultants did look at this quite extensively and several times, and we're going to be able to remove some valves that we thought we weren't going to be able to remove. We found out we can remove them. So we did find some efficiencies and did look at some of those depths and did a lot of consideration on what that meant with the lining in future and all that too. So.
And
So it was Ron, Reed, Tamara, and some consulting engineers helped with that design.
And that will be one of the pipe sections that we will request a sample on and check the thickness on. But once we've done that, it's already cured. So if there's any problems, or we think there is any problems, it needs to be, not that I'm anticipating that, and hopefully we don't have to anticipate that, then dealt with before the highway comes in and you're digging 40-some feet down. But that was the primary logic, is thinking that, can this PVC pipe that's in there right now, it can handle the 12, 13, 15 feet that's there, but how will it handle 47 feet? And if you go a little bit to, one direction of that toward the hospital, that pipe was installed as ductile iron because it was already going under the highway and felt to be a sturdier pipe, and engineers, when they installed or designed that project, but I guess they didn't either think ahead about, oh, this might be an exit ramp area, or didn't know, and so it is a preventative option. Again, it'd be Ron or, again, Reed, if you felt that there'd be more concern there.
Well, I'm just asking if somebody have done some calculations. I mean, it's all good and well to
Yep.
say, well, and I agree, it will increase the strength.
Right.
I really don't. I've never done anything like this. I don't know exactly how you, well, I figure out how you can calculate the loads, but what the, pipe needs to, how strong it needs to be under that condition. So, I mean, that's something that an engineer
Right.
should check out. And
Right.
as long as you've done that, then that's fine.
Tomorrow.
Other questions?
Yeah, I've got a, I'm familiar with cast iron and PVC and HDP, and I know what they're about, but what I don't know is the life cycle of each of these. Is there a opportunity to educate me here?
I don't really know that myself either. I don't know if you're asking me, like, how long is a HDPE pipe going to last compared to a PVC pipe compared to a clay? I don't have, if that's
A
the,
liner.
if that's the,
Yeah,
if that's the
yeah.
answer. I want to say off the top of my head, they give us 50 years, I think, on the lining, but I could be confusing that with my manhole project, and that might be 50 years on the manhole. I have to admit, right now, I can't remember which.
I asked you last year, and you said 50 years with some confidence. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure that's
I
right.
think, 50 years sticks in my head, but I can't really, I do both projects, and right offhand, I can't remember which one. Though I do know this, with the clay, because of the way they're put together in sections, we have a lot of problems where the two pieces come together. Roots get in there, and now the roots get in there, and then they grow and they break the pipe more. That kind of thing happens much more with the clay than PVC. So I don't have a good answer for you on that.
And for new
I-
construction, is it PVC or
Yes.
is it HDPE or what is it?
It's PVC.
I was
It's
just going to
PVC.
talk to cast iron a little bit, and cast iron is totally dependent on the era it was manufactured. There is still some cast iron that is from the turn of the last century that's still good, but then there was some cast iron that was made in different points in time in the last century that didn't last as long. So
And that's really more related to the water cast iron more typically. You see cast iron sometimes in the sewer laterals, not so much in the mains, but there are a few. Ductile irons put under a couple of the highways. HDPE, I know our big piece of HDPE runs from, if you know where the bridge south of Dairy Queen is there. It runs from there and heads west toward the treatment plant. That's a big chunk of HDPE that I wasn't here at the time. I don't know if that was put in as one big connected piece. Again, partly because of the river, going underneath the river. So that was the choice there for, I'm guessing, DNR reasons, and hardier than maybe PVC. And that's where maybe an engineer like Tim or some of the others would know why that was chosen. I know ductile is under a couple of highways because it's a little stronger than the PVC. I've seen the new infrastructure go in, and that's PVC, 3034 pipe. So
no doubt about it, though, clay is the most vulnerable and has caused us the most problem over the years. So, clay.
My only other question was, when you guys put this out for bid, is there a generic spec, or what are you asking for? And are each of these companies offering you something different?
no, the first part of the spec is generic engineering details related to if the project's not done on time, this is what you'll pay and that sort of thing. Then there's a section called relining sewers, and that I and Ron and got started back even when our assistant city engineer, whose name slips me, was here, that we worked on that based on NASCO, I believe is the name of the National Organization of Pipes and whatnot, using their specs and pulling things together. So it's a standard spec that they all have to go by. Some of you that were here last year, and this might be more detail than is important to this, but we had last year decided our original bid, we were going to insist upon at least a 6-inch thickness minimum on all the pipe, and then have an alternate bid be, but then when we put that out, one of the contractors called and explained why that really wasn't a good idea, and that it should be based on these formulas that we were discussing with Tim here a minute ago for thickness and reasons why. And so then we made the alternate bid be based on your calculations for depth and water and load and et cetera that they look at. So going forward, now this year again, we dropped this 6 mil minimum because we came upon some more information that made us realize, oh, that really wasn't a good idea. We thought it was, it'll be hardier, but getting into the explanations from some contractors that do the work and how they make their original thickness of their liner, we realized it was kind of unfair to some of the companies, especially if they do a measurement and decide, say for instance on this Hoffman Park job, that pipe needs to be 8 inches thick after it's done curing. That should be based on calculations of depth and loads based on the road and that kind of thing. So,
Thank you.
But so every contractor bids on the same material type, though.
correct.
So yeah,
Correct.
they're just all authorized to install that particular product.
Correct. Their processes might be a little different. One gentleman called and said, "Oh, we feel like maybe we should," he unfortunately, which I think is sad, because it was HydroClean and we've used them for our manholes and they were second bidders last year. He called and he said, "Oh, we decided not to bid this year because after 15 feet deep, you've got to use water." And I don't think they realized, and I tried to make it as clear as I could on that page one of the, that this isn't 15 feet deep now. It's right now you'd be lining it with steam because it's only 12, 13 feet deep. It's going to be 40 some. And so he called and asked about that like 2 days before and they didn't have time to come in and pop the manholes. At the back of the spec, I also give them the sheets that you see and also a manhole sheet so that if they cannot get into town, they can use our manhole depths. But a lot of them come into town, see what the traffic's like, pop the manholes. I've got an interceptor cutting through here. I'm going to have to do some special bypassing. That's their due diligence in that regard. So, but otherwise, it's a standard that they're all going off of. Any other questions? And on that, I'll see if I can close this for the next gentleman.
I put Bob's in the very bottom.
Does anybody have any questions at all?
I move that we approve the resolution supporting the bid award for the 2019 sanitary sewer lining project.
Second. There you go.
Any other discussion at all? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same. Resolution passes. And moving on, we have reports, and we have one from, is it Bob Pfister?
Yes.
From Advanced Disposal Services, to talk about recycling.
I'll give you an introduction. So Bob Pfister is here from Advanced Disposal. We had some discussions about recycling and some of the challenges that Advanced Disposal has had with recycling the last few years. And I saw a New York Times article about struggles communities are having with recycling and the cost of recycling. And I thought it might just be good to get this on public record and have Bob come and talk to our policymakers to introduce this. This is something that especially city councils are going to have to wrestle with in the future of what's the value of recycling, how much are citizens willing to pay, and the true state of where we're at. So I thought I'd invite Bob tonight to give a little bit of brief of the challenges that Advanced Disposal is facing that are probably going to get passed along to customers. Thanks for coming, Bob.
Well, thank you. Good evening. My name is Bob Pfister. I'm the Municipal Marketing Manager for Advanced Disposal. I've been in the industry for 40 years, so I'm one of the old men of the industry. And as Kevin said, this is an issue that not only Advanced Disposal is facing, but the entire industry is facing for single-stream recycling collection. And I just wanted to kind of go through some of the basics tonight, just give you an overview and try to answer any questions you have. But it is a very big issue that's going on. First of all, what I just wanted to kind of let you know as a background is some of the differences with collection of garbage versus collection of recyclables. In the blue here, you'll see this truck, when we pick it up at the curb, we pick up a garbage cart at the curb, we take it, and we basically go right to the landfill. It gets disposed of. It's a very simple process, not very labor intensive compared to recycling. But when you look at recycling and we pick up the recycling cart here, there's an intermediate step that happens, and it goes to a processing facility now where the single stream material is processed, separated, and then packaged for end-use markets. So there's an entire step here in the recycling process that's not there for the garbage. So that is the issue that the industry and municipalities are faced with now when it comes to single stream recycling. Just on this slide, these are just some of the cost drivers that you may or may not be aware of that happens when we're in the state of recycling that we have right now. When you have depressed commodity markets, obviously the price of the material goes up. You have higher purification costs based on contamination, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. When you have to go further for those end-use markets, you have higher transportation costs. So this slide is just meant to show you that there's costs there that do drive recycling up that you don't see with the refuse collection. And the biggest issue that we've faced since 2017 is China, without any doubt. China back in 2017 instituted a policy that was called the Green Fence. And what that did was that it restricted certain recyclables that were coming into the country. And China is by far the world's largest acceptor of recyclables in the world, by far. I mean, nobody's even close to second on that. And in the U.S., 40% of our paper was going to China, 20% of the bottles, and 33% of the rigid plastics were actually going to China. And then in 2018, they took the Green Fence and they changed that to the National Sword. And what that basically did was restrict and prohibit the amount of contaminated recyclables that were going into China. And the way they did that was they put a limit of 0.5% of contaminants in recycling in order for it to go into China. Well, there wasn't a processing facility and aren't very many in the country right now that can even meet that. So what China basically did is they shut off themselves to the rest of the world as the importer of recyclables. They basically were saying, we're tired of being the dumping ground for the world. And what was happening was, with the recycling and single stream, we see between 18 to 25% contaminants in those carts, things that can't be recycled. And you'd be surprised what goes into some of those carts. But this is by far the biggest driver that has thrown recycling on its ear right now in the residential collection market. Again, this is just a couple things that I just alluded to. They basically shut the door on us. Mixed paper, which is one of the biggest components of single stream recycling, which is the envelopes, the magazines, the mixed paper, it's basically worthless at this point because it can't go anywhere. And China is moving to extend that ban more and more. So they are not letting up at all. So what does this all mean to River Falls? What does it mean to advanced disposal? And I'm just trying to drill it down, going from the national and the international down to what it really means here, because this is what really counts. It's very scary. I don't see a bottom in sight at this point. We don't have the capabilities within the U.S. to process this material. The processing facilities are backing up, so there's a glut of material. And it may be too costly for municipalities to continue weekly single-stream recycling. And we're starting to see that. If you've read any of the news articles in the paper, we see large municipalities starting to actually remove single-stream recycling from the collection methods. And if I can just digress for a minute, 40 years ago when I came into the industry, we had one truck going down the street, if you remember. You were picking up yard waste and recycling and garbage. One truck, and it was gone. And then we said, as a nation, we had to say, that's not right. We're not a throwaway society. We need to recycle. So we started to recycle, and when we did that, we needed something to kickstart that. So remember, and it still is, we have free recycling and you have garbage. We had to have that recycling at no cost. And if you remember how it was collected when it first started, is we had a truck that went down the street and it had all different bins. And the driver got out and grabbed the bin and he put the plastics in one bin and he put the aluminum in another, and he put the pop bottles in another, and he put paper in another. And we didn't have any contamination, because if it didn't go in one of those bins, he just left it in the bin, put it on the curb, and then the resident took it out. That is so labor intensive that it wasn't sustainable. Because not only did we do that at the curb, but then it had to come back and he had to empty each one of those containers into the separate pile that went to separate processors. Okay? Very labor intensive, and we couldn't really maintain that with the costs that municipalities were willing to pay. So we went to a dual sort system, and what happened, and the reason we could do that, is we had processing facilities that could take the non-paper products. So if you remember, we morphed into paper products in one bin and everything else in the other. And that worked for a while, but it still was very costly, because our driver had to get out and put the paper in one bin and the plastics in another. So that morphed into what we have now as single stream. And the reason we could do that was the processing facilities could not only take the non-paper products, but now they were set up to take the paper products, okay? And what's happened was the industry basically had told everybody that, hey, if you're not sure, go ahead and put it in recycling, and if it's not recyclable, we'll take it out, okay? Well, that's how the contamination started, and that's how we moved from 8% contamination in a dual sort system to 20% as an average in single stream. That was all well and good for years, because China was taking it. But when China said we're only going to take 0.5% contamination, that's where single stream really started causing the problem. Okay, so I'm just kind of digressing a little bit, but that's the history according to Bob. So, so if we go back and we look at what are the alternate possibilities, because single stream, we have to clean it up. We have some municipalities that are going back to a dual sort system. Okay, but again, it's very costly. And we have some processors that are actually landfilling some of the 3 through 7s, which have no value, or the mixed paper. Now, that's not done in Wisconsin, because Wisconsin, we have a landfill ban on those recyclables. But in other states, that's what's happening. Now, they're taken to recyclers, and it's a higher cost, but they're being recycled in Wisconsin, which is good, because we have that ban. We have diminishing processing capacity. The recyclers can't make money. They're starting to go out of business. They can't get rid of their material, so we have diminishing capacity. They're refusing to accept additional quantities in some instances, we have a quota that we can bring them a month and not a ton more. So they're actually putting quotas on things. This is something that just started recently. They needed to get more money, so they said, well, we're going to put a surcharge on a load if it's got contamination. So you'll dump the load, they'll come over, they'll look at it and say, oh, that's 25% contamination, here's your surcharge, and away you go. So there's a definite incentive to keep those loads clean. And again, I talked about landfilling certain quantities. So I'm going to start drilling down more. And this chart actually shows the market value of different commodities and where they've gone from 2017, if you remember, that was the beginning of the slide where the green fence started, to now. And if you look at the blue line, that's OCC or corrugated cardboard. In 2017, it was worth about $165 a ton. Now it's worth $45. Mixed paper, which is the bottom line, that you can see is basically worthless. And the middle line is ONP, which is old newspaper. And that's we still see a lot of that in the waste stream. But you can see how everything's been dropping since 2017. This is single stream recycling, and this is the actual cost that we are charged at the processor to bring a ton of single stream. And if you'll look in 2017, we were just a little bit over break even, which is the red line, and you can see it dropping ever since. What's interesting about this graph is you'll see the uptick in July of 2018. Well, we had our loads reevaluated for contamination, and we were doing pretty good, so they raised the value. But then they started with the surcharges, and they brought it right back down to where we are now. So that's what this, but this is the actual cost to bring a ton of single stream to a processor, and right now it's a negative $33.87 in that area. So it cost us $33.87 to get rid of a ton of single stream, where we used to get $50, $60 a ton. So that's an $80 a ton swing from getting 50 to minus 30. So it's a huge deal. And this is not just with advanced disposal. This is the whole market. So here's the impact, and this is what it means to River Falls. And these are actual numbers now. So River Falls, you have approximately 3,555 single-family units, and you recycle 1,060 tons a year. And when you look at the value that we have at $33.57 that we're paying, when you put it in the grinder and you run all the numbers, that cost is 84 cents a home just in the processing costs and what's happened since China. That's what advanced disposal has absorbed since 2017, China. And those are actual numbers, and that equates to River Falls. And I try to drill this down to show you exactly what it means here, not on a global scale. So that's really the impact that advanced disposal has assumed there. So I didn't want to take a lot of your time. I wanted to try to move through this for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and if I can, I'd love to.
So was there any sort of warning, like that this was going to happen, that the fence was going to go up, and that the sword was, and all these other things? Like
back in 2017, there was banter of that, and everybody thought there's no way that China's going to do what they did.
I meant
and
prior
then
to
they slammed the door on everybody.
Prior to 2017, though, I guess what happened prior to that? Like, were they giving any indication that they weren't going to do this?
No.
Just all of a sudden in 2017, they just. 2017,
that's when the inkling started, and in 2018 is when the national sword went into, and that's when everybody started scrambling. What we are seeing, though, is that We are seeing paper mills that are starting to try to come online to take some of the paper product, because now we can't bring it to China, so we have to do something, in our country and in Canada to try to do that. We are seeing some entrepreneurial things with the plastics, where some companies are taking the plastics and they're pelletizing it so that they can take it for energy or take it for that. So we are trying to see some of that, but we're 2 and 3 years away from that being, a viable alternative. But to answer your question, it was pretty quick and boom. And it hasn't recovered at all. If I go back to that, you can see from 2017. I mean, recycling's always been cyclical, but it's never been like this. So.
Given that you've been in the business for 40 years, what do you see as a solution and when to this?
The solution I see is to have us being self-reliant on recycling.
The U.S.?
The U.S. And, recycling needs to be here. Recycling is good. Recycling needs to stay. And my main concern is personally, I don't want to see recycling collection programs stopped until it gets better and then start it up again. Because once you start a program and you try to start it again, it's very, very difficult. So what we're doing as a company is, and we're working with our municipalities, and I'll have something in about a week, but we're doing an educational campaign to the residents on what's recyclable and what's not. And I really firmly believe that people want to do the right thing and they want to put the right recyclables in there, but there's just so much confusion on certain people on what's recyclable, what's not. You all see the little triangle on the bottom? Well, everybody thinks because that's a triangle that it's recyclable. But a red Solo cup is polystyrene. And it's got a recycling symbol on it. It's not recyclable.
What number does it have on it?
I'm sorry?
What number does it have
It
on
has 6. Or it doesn't have anything.
Don't our garbage cans say we take all of them?
Can't
And
remember.
right now it's a contaminant because it was never an issue when we had the contract signed.
Right.
So we could take it and it wasn't an issue. But my point is that's not recyclable, but it has the little symbol on it. So.
Okay.
But
Like Bob said, though, he's going to give us some promotional material coming up here in the near future to help educate our customers on what can go in and how to sort it when you do put it in there and all that.
Exactly, and I think I really think that's the answer that we have to do, and we all have to get better. And like I said, I believe people want to recycle the right thing. I think they want to do the right thing, so if we explain it to them, make it so that they understand, we can continue to can do this until we get through this and we're self-reliant in the U.S. But it's going to be a couple years. I mean, it's going to be tough.
You mentioned that it was 84 cents per household per month, the cost to do the single stream recycling, right?
No, that 84 cents is just the cost that we've incurred
Right.
from that.
So if that were to be passed on to the customer, 84 cents. But what is the dollar amount if there was no recycling? What's the environmental impact? Those sorts of things. Like what would it cost? Like if contaminants and, the extra space that's being taken up in the landfill, if there's additional penalties or like what would be the dollar amount for that?
Ooh, I couldn't give you a dollar amount, but
It'd be more?
I mean, I could figure it out if I put my head to it, but you're absolutely right. There's other costs to that. If we think about just the collection on the curb, we're using the same trucks that cost $230,000 a piece. You have the same labor, we have the same fuel, we have the same maintenance, we have everything the same carts to pick it up. The only difference is what we pay at the landfill and what we get back on recycling. So that's your collection cost. Then you have to talk about your intrinsic costs and your secondary cost of taking up airspace, what it does to the environment, what's the greenhouse gas effect that you have from the landfill and from that. I mean, there's a whole multitude of what it's going to cost. And that's why I said recycling, in my mind, is the right thing to do, and I want to continue to see it continue. I don't want to see the stuff going back in the landfill.
Go ahead.
You phrased the right thing to do. So I don't want to overstate my expertise, but I went to a school with the word environmental in the name when I was a kid and became pretty educated on these things. And I've learned since. I'm not basing this on my elementary education. My understanding, now, this is a very multifaceted topic. That's part of the part I'm well aware of. I mean, you mentioned several of the things, producing new materials versus recycling, and you're using the phrase "the right thing to do." And I just want to make sure I understand one part of the piece correctly before I ask anything else. It's my understanding that take a pop can, that as far as cost benefit, it's about the same to go get the ore, make a new can, as it is to pour hot water in my pop can, throw it in the bin, have somebody bring it in a truck, and turn it into another pop can. I mean, it's basically a wash, correct? In most materials. And I know there's a lot of specifics here, but basically it's a wash. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as I know, yeah.
Yep. And I'm with you that, there are a lot of benefits. It provides jobs. It's like, there's many good things. I'm not the cynic here. So, having said that, I guess seeing where the economy is going and things like that, I guess, what are the options? I mean, is incineration a good option? Where recycling can go down a lot of roads. I believe it's Singapore that takes their trash and recycling, what we would call recyclables included. They're producing energy and using the ash to make some form of dirt is my understanding. I mean, you talked about entrepreneurial things. There's some neat stuff going on in this field. Are we examining all the options, or are we trying to keep our current infrastructure usable and protect the system a little? I mean, I'd hope we would want to see full use of our current system. But where are we going? Where would you like to go? What are our options? Are they all on the table? This is not just a River Falls question. So,
and those are great questions and great insights to that. I believe the infrastructure that we have to get the material to a state where it can go to a final user,
yep,
are all there. And I think what you're seeing is you're seeing some of these things. Gasification's one issue
Right.
that's coming out. However, it's very expensive and it's not very practical on a large scale. We're looking at, although we're talking about single stream, we're talking about anaerobic digestion for some of the organics, and now you're starting to be able to put food products in with your organics, and it's just in its infancy. So I think all those are where they need to be and they need to be going, but we have to be self-reliant, I believe, in the U.S. to do that. And you're seeing people step up, but when you talk about some of the third world countries like China, Singapore, Taiwan, Vietnam, who was taking all that, their labor costs are so low that they're able to sort the material. I mean, China used to take, and Taiwan used to take most of our electronics, and they could, with their labor market, they could separate out the gold, the silver, and all that stuff. Where if we did that here, there's no way a business could function and stay solvent to do that. So I think we have to find more automation where we don't have that, but it's going to happen, and because I believe the push for recycling is still there, and it needs to stay there, and we can do that. So
you kind of answered another one of my questions that you used the word automation. I was going to ask if robotics is going to be part of the solution. I mean, so people aren't sorting it. Have a robot do it.
I was at a recycling plant about 5 months ago, and they had an optical arm, and you could program in a red Tide bottle, and it would pull out only red Tide bottles. It was amazing. It was so cool. So there's a lot of that. There's eddy currents to pull out this. There's pneumatic blowers that do this. There's optical sorters for different colored glass. So all those automation and all that is coming on board to do that. So we see it progressing all the time, because if it's labor intensive, it can't be done. So. And I'm sure I've run over all my time. I can talk forever, I'm sorry.
No, Bob, this is interesting. I want to get this in front of our policymakers and city leaders. As the community dialogue just is beginning on this topic, it's good just to get people informed so they're able to disseminate facts within the community and also create awareness. So, and look for solutions.
Right. And I appreciate the time today to come in and talk about it, to inform you and answer your questions. I would love to come back in 6 months or a year and give you an update on where we're at, if you'd like me to.
Yep.
This is something that involves you as a community, it involves us as a supplier, and we need to work on a solution together. I'd love to show you the educational material we developed too. So I thank you for your time tonight, I really do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I
Thanks, Bob.
appreciate it. Now, I was just going to say, too, is our contract with Advanced Disposal is good through the end of next year. But it'll be mid-next year, we'll be going out to bid, again, for these services, and I'm sure Advanced will be involved in that bid process.
I would hope.
But I would, but I would expect, different pricing mechanisms, I'm sure, when we see the next round of bids come through.
Yep.
Is that probably fair to assume that?
I think you'll see a number of alternatives for the city to evaluate and see how they want to do that. Right now, with most contracts, not just here, but everywhere, most of the risk falls on the hauler with this, and I think there'll probably be some risk sharing on that, good and bad. So at least it'll be an alternative, let's put it that way. It'll be an alternative, so.
Bob, appreciate it a lot.
All righty, thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Now we move on to the finance report.
I would like to introduce our new finance director, Sarah Carlson. She's here tonight, and I believe she'll be here probably most third Mondays
Sure
to
will
do the
be.
finance report. But you've been here for what, 6 weeks, month? A month. So
Welcome.
we're really glad to have Sarah on board, and she's our new finance director and is going to run you through the finance report. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go through some high-level information, but if you have questions, we'll dig into those as well. So from an electric fund standpoint, so this is as of March, the year-to-date revenues were $3.3 million with the year-to-date expenses of $3.4 million. Cash and investment reserves are close to $5 million. A thing to note on the electric fund here, we have a moratorium that's ending today. So it started November 1st and it's ending on April 15th. So what that, I'm sure you all know what that means, but meaning we won't follow up or shut off electric services to our customers if they're not paying. So we sent out letters. We sent out 634 letters of delinquent accounts. We made 421 calls. So in between the letters and the calls, we got that many more folks that paid. A couple breakdowns just for your benefit. There's 168 accounts that have over $100 that's past due, 32 that's over $500. There's 11 that's over $1,000. So we're going to now work to collect those amounts. Kevin, did you want to add anything
I was
about
just
the
going to say, too,
procedures
so
there?
the 600 and some letters that went out, that's a pretty typical number. Some of you that have been around a couple of years, that's a pretty typical number that goes out this time of the year, just over 600. By the time we get to actual disconnect day, we'll probably be down to about 40. There'll be about 20 scrambles, and we'll be down to about 20. And you'll have probably 10 to 15 that'll lose power overnight on a disconnect situation, and 4 or 5 that'll most likely will be off for multiple days. That's what we've seen in the past historically. It seems like we're on that trend. The folks at the front desk, our customer service reps, this is a very busy time of the year for them with calls and payment arrangements and working with people. So the next 2 weeks, they're going to have their hands full trying to get that 600 and some list down to, like I said, it'll probably end up being 4 or 5. So, but typical numbers, the moratorium, again, ending, and some people elect not to pay all winter, and some kind of cut back. So April, well, today is the day, but we're not doing it until next week. So,
Right.
Sarah, that's great information. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any questions on that piece? Okay. In terms of the water fund, year-to-date revenues are $460,000, year-to-date expenses $489,000, cash and investments of $2.1 million. Sewer fund $895,000 in revenues, expenses of $614,000, cash and investments of $4.4 million. And then finally, the stormwater fund, year-to-date revenues of $149,000 with expenses of $112,000 and about $500,000 of investments there. So in terms of just unusual activity, there wasn't a whole lot, and I don't know that you would expect to see a whole lot. It's early in the year here. We're tracking pretty on budget across all the funds. There are a couple of things that are driving some increased expenses, and specifically in the electric fund, we have some increased depreciation. We had a Hydro relicensing, so you see some expenses there, and some debt service costs are in there as well. But otherwise, there wasn't anything that stood out to me as a large item to discuss with you all. Any further questions?
Also, I was just going to say, too, revenues tend to be a little flatter in March and April for the electric revenues. We call those the shoulder months, where really not a lot of air conditioning load. It's staying light longer during the daytime, so less light usage. So we all, like myself, we all noticed the March and April bills to be a little bit lower, just like September and October potentially. So revenues were down a little bit as well.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to the utility dashboards. Does anybody have any questions? Great. We'll move on to Kevin's report.
I don't have a lot to add. I do want to give a little advertisement again. So I have not had any takers yet, but if anybody would like to go to the American Public Power Association National Conference in Austin, Texas on June 7th through the 12th, WPPI has offered us a scholarship for that. So if somebody wants to go to Austin,
I think
and
I'm
if,
in.
and if, if you're around,
I think I am.
something we could offer. So, and if a couple people want to go, we can probably make that work as well. So see me on that. I have the brochure. It's a great conference. You can learn a lot about the electric utility industry and what goes on nationally with that. So that's available.
Does anybody have anything else? All right, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned.